Hey there, it's Brian Sebastian. Movie reviews and more. Women on TV.tv, Worldwide TV Network, formerly the Broadcast Women's TV channel. IT 247 out of Franklin, Tennessee, iHeartRadio, and all the platforms around the world. So this is special, and I'll tell you why. Because we have Steve on. But besides that, it's one of the things is it's what's being created. It's what's being done. It's about box sets. It's about the company. Steve, who are you? Where are you coming from?
My name is Steve Latshaw. I'm with Verdugo Entertainment, and we are in the business of acquiring, restoring, and releasing classic films that are somehow orphaned, that haven't been out there on Blu-ray or in HD yet.
Now, the reason I like this, I found a documentary years ago, the Santa Barbara Film Festival, of restoring films in general. Some of them were buried underneath the ground. I think it was called Cellulite or something like that, but I never forgot that. Restoring classic films, restoring films in general is a lost art, but it's so important to preserve those classic films. Talk about why that company, your company, is important and why that aspect is people for that to see.
Well, it's part of it is preservation. You know, a lot of our history is in the films that we've made, and there's some great art that needs to be shared, you know, to future generations, and people also discover films that are older that touch them in a way they didn't expect to. Mackintosh and T.J, which is part of the box set, was a film that Roy Rogers made. It was his last film. He made it in 1975. It was released briefly in theaters, played a little bit on TV, and then played mostly on foreign television for the 40 years. So most people have never seen this film. It's an amazing drama. It's not a cowboy adventure. It's a drama set in the real world of the Texas ranch country in the mid-70s. Roy plays a itinerant cowboy that's aging, that is just trying to find work at ranches, and he befriends a young teenage boy who's homeless, and teaches him some life lessons over the course of the story. It's got an amazing score by Whalen Jennings. Willie Nelson is in there. It hits all these buttons, and yet people didn't know about this film, and now it's being rediscovered, and many people are seeing it for the first time ever, and it's a thrill to be able to bring something like that was believed to have been gone to a wide audience.
See, I love stuff like that. It's all about reintroducing the audience, young and old, to the things that people might not have seen, that they might have missed in between everything. I call it in between the cracks. Very special to hear that. Thank you for doing that for me, because as that movie whore, I love stuff like that. And I would always tease Leonard Maltin. I'm like, Leonard, I'm a movie whore. You're a historian. I like to see these things like that because I like to get that out to the audiences that people aren't reaching, if that makes sense. And preservation and restoring films is a lost art. I think it is, but it's so needed in today's world, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and let's face it, the film elements are getting older. A lot of the older stuff from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s were on nitrate stock, and so they're deteriorated. And some of this stuff is in danger of getting lost. And so, for instance, the other film on our box set was Roy's first starring role. And there are no surviving. They used to, when they put these movies out, this one came out in 1938. It's called Under Western Stars. The original running time was 65 minutes. And when they released all these films to television in the 50s, Republic cut them all to 53 minutes and 30 seconds so that they could fit in an hour time slot with commercials. In the case of Under Western Stars, none of the original full-length material exists any longer. It's just gone. And so there's a movie, you're not going to be able to recover the entire thing. We were fortunate enough to find a 16 millimeter print owned by a private owner that had been the print that was struck for the director of the film back in the 1940s. And it was full length. It was 65 minutes long. And so we were able to do a 4K scan on this element and clean it up, and it looks wonderful. So we've been able to preserve that particular film for future generations. So that's a great thing there.
Was it one of the things where you put out the word around the world on finding these lost things like that? Because someone has them, whether it's in their basement, their attic, it's buried underneath something, and then you get them and you start to restore them, because it's not an easy process, if I remember correctly, either, right?
No, it's not an easy process, and I'm glad you brought that up. In the case of Mackintosh T.J., the Penland family, the producer's name was Tim Penland, and his kids, now adults, they own the film. And when we first came to them, they said, we don't think we have anything. Their dad had passed away. They didn't think they had any film. They had an old tape master that had been made in the early 90s, I believe, and they thought a 16 millimeter print might be somewhere, but they didn't have the 35 millimeter film elements, the negative that we needed to do a proper restoration. So our head of restoration, Ron Smith, who's been in business for a long time, knows a lot of people. He started doing some digging, and he found that all of the elements we needed had been stored at Technicolor in Camarillo back in 1975. They'd been there safely ever since then. So that was a happiness to be able to call the Penlands and say, hey, we found your film. But you don't always get that lucky, because some things are just gone forever. The other complication, and I don't know if I mentioned, we call these barn finds. You know, when you find somebody's got this tucked away in their barn somewhere. The other complication, particularly if there are prints all over the world or film elements all over the world, are the rights issues. You know, who owns what rights in what territory. You have to kind of wind your way through that stuff too, to find out who's the owner, who can make a deal with us to put this film out. And that sometimes gets tricky too. I've made a number of films of my own as a director, and you know, you have a film that one company might own it for Germany and some other European territories. Another company might own it for Latin America. Another company might own it for domestic. Maybe you're wanting to release it domestically, but the company that owns it has been out of business for 10 years. So it gets very tricky. You have to do a lot of research before you even start the restoration process.
Well, that's always interesting. And that's why it's an honor to talk to you about, what you guys do, because I forgot all about the rights and the territories, which is most important, because if you don't get those, I mean, what do? You might have found that project, but then again, how long does it take with the rights? And a lot of people don't understand that.
Well, we're all at Verdugo, we're all film buffs, and we all have, and a lot of the decisions are made in terms of what we're putting out by, hey, this is a really great film. I've never seen it on Blu-ray, or I've never seen it streaming. Where is it? And, you know, that sometimes is the trick, where you either you do the research and you find that there's no film elements left. You know, they were in a lab somewhere, or they were thrown away, and all that's left are tape dubs of it, in which case that's not really useful. Or one title we were looking for, we heard that all of the film elements were in Greece, but there was a rights dispute, and so there was no point in chasing it, because there was so much confusion as to who owned the film. And that kind of thing happens all the time. You always start with a wish list of, 50 or 100 titles, and by the time it's whittled down, the ones you can actually go after, there might be 2 or 3 or 4, And the studios now will license their films to different companies like Kino and Shot Factory and things like that. So there's competition. Everybody's looking for those rare films that nobody's put out yet. So you just have to kind of jump in and see if you can be first.
Talk about why this one was important for you guys to do. What was the reason behind that? And what's one of the ones or one of the two that got away, or can you not say that because of the competition?
I don't know. I won't get into the ones that got away, because there's so many. It's just, you just kind of say, okay, that's not going to happen. Let's move on. Mackintosh and T.J. I've been a Roy Rogers fan since I was 4 years old, watching his TV show on as a young kid in the early 60s. And about 20 years ago, the Roy Rogers Museum in Apple Valley was closing. We were going out of business. They were moving their operation to Branson. It was about 2 weeks before they closed. I said, well, I should go down there and just kind of touch base with my childhood one last time before I go. And I drove down. It was a stormy, rainy day. And I toured the museum. And then I went into the gift shop and bought some DVDs. And one of the DVDs was this film, Mackintosh and T.J. They'd done what's called a standard def transfer of the film to DVD and VHS back in, probably the late 80s, early 90s. And so I took it home and watched it, fell in love with the movie because it's a drama. It's not Roy playing the cowboy hero. He's playing a real character. It's a real honest family movie, but it deals with some really serious problems. Everything from one of the characters is abusing his wife. One of the characters is a peeping Tom. There's some real major issues that the characters have to deal with. There's a murder in the course of the story, and so it's taking this Roy Rogers character but putting him in a real life honest human drama. And it was a pretty amazing film. It was beautifully composed, and so I basically decided someday I want to be involved with restoring this thing. So we chased it for a number of years, and we talked to the family, got in touch with them, and gradually they decided it would be a good idea to do. So that was a labor of love that I kind of brought to the table, and it's been very successful for us. In terms of the other film that's on the box set, which is Roy's first starring role, Under Western Stars, I was working with a noted film historian and collector named Woody Wise, and we were talking about Mackintosh and T.J. And he says, you got Roy's last movie. You ought to try to find his first one so you could pair them together on a box set. And I said, well, I don't know where there's a complete print. And he said, well, it just so happens that film producer Sam Sherman, who's also a collector, had the complete print, Joseph Kane's personal print. And so we were able to make a deal with Sam and put the films together. So that was the Mackintosh and T.J. was a labor of love for us, and it just was a no-brainer to put the first movie on a set with the last movie.
Talk about your history. You've always been a fan of film, obviously, but what are you doing now? How was everything for you last year during the pandemic? Were you working on the final stages of everything leading up to where we are now?
Yeah, we kept working. Our operation, we kept working, and I'm with Verdugo Entertainment as our distribution wing. I'm primarily with Visual Data Media Services, which is the post-production house that actually does the restoration work. And we stayed in business throughout the pandemic. It was all systems go. The trickiest thing that we had to deal with, we have had, I think, 3 or 4 new releases go through our facility. And the trickiest thing was having to do like cast reunions on video and DVD and Blu-ray commentary tracks. We had to do all of that on Zoom. And the quality on Zoom is not as good as if you have 3 people in a recording studio doing a commentary track, or multiple people being shot for a documentary. So that was the big thing, was just trying to coordinate 2 to 3 or 4 people in a room or in separate rooms for commentaries and things like that.
I can imagine what that was like and the frustration, but you're taking whatever you can have because that's all you can get at that point.
Exactly. And, we had some people, sort of complained a little bit about the quality on Zoom. And it's like, well, that's the world we live in. When we recorded that in 2020, there was no other option. So you just kind of roll with it. I think in some ways the pandemic helped us because people were more interested in getting content to watch at home because that's what you were stuck doing. Our first release was an 80s action film called Action U.S.A. and that actually went theatrical.
That's my friend's movie, Jon Stewart.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We worked with John on the commentary track for that, John, and it was a big it played theatrically.
I didn't know
in the
you
middle
had
of the
that. I know I helped him promote that because he was telling me,
Yeah.
Brian, this is what I want to do. And I remember when he did that years ago. That's interesting. I didn't know that was you guys.
Well, it's an amazing film, as you know, because
And Quentin Tarantino liked it.
It's got, well, I hope so. It's got all these organic stunts in it that nobody ever does anymore. I mean, it's an astounding film to look at, and the theatrical audiences that saw it last year were just overwhelmed by it. And I think it was because it was so different. A, there weren't many new movies in theaters, and B, Action USA is so different from anything that anybody was seeing in theaters at that time. So I was very happy with the way that thing turned out. We did an excellent restoration job on it. It looks gorgeous, and we had a lot of fun with it. The same with Mackintosh and T.J. Again, it was the pandemic, I think, helped it because we're creating content for people to view at home. So I think it helped it along.
That's interesting. I had no idea. I was wondering why I remember that name Verdugo, and I'm like, yeah. I remember when John said, hey, we're thinking about releasing Quentin Tarantino, call me Alamo's Draft House. Alamo wanted it. I'm like, well, that's good. All right, John, I'll push it on my end. And I never forgot that. He was really happy with what you guys did.
We would love to. There are still we have film elements on Action USA. We would love to get that into Tarantino's theater. That would be, but at the time we released it, his theater was closed for remodeling. So I think they're back up and operating again, but that would be a great, anytime we get the attention of Quentin Tarantino, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it was interesting because I walked by there a couple times during June, and they had lines. Then they were sold out for the midnight show. I'm like, how is this possible? And at the same time, I was saying, good for you, because I had only been back to the theaters once by that point, because I said I wasn't going back to the end of the year, and I was going over to see the Greg Lemley's, because I support NoHo theaters, and I want to make sure people go and see those independent films, because if we're not supporting them, who is? And that's a big, huge thing.
I love the NoHo. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go there Saturday night. A very good friend of mine, a director who I wrote a couple of films for, Gary Jones, is debuting his action movie, indie action movie there Saturday night. It's called, I think, Escape from Cell Block 13, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, I remember that movie. I like that. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. But, Tarantino's theater, I mean, the best movie experiences of my life have been in the New Beverly, just because it reminds me of what going to the movies was like when I was a kid.
Very true. Yeah, and that's why he likes that old feel, and hats off to Quentin on things like that, and to those film lovers like yourself and what you're doing. Give your social media links, and people can look out to the website of what you guys are doing and creating next.
Well, I think the best place to go for is people can go to the Verdugo page on Facebook that has all of our information about all these films and various cool links that you can link to. They can go to my account. I'm Steve Latshaw on Facebook, and they see a lot of stuff posted about this stuff. But I would recommend everybody go to the Verdugo Facebook page. That will really get them the information they need.
Steve, pleasure and honor talking to you. That's interesting that you guys did my friend Jon Stewart's movie. I didn't even think about that or even know about that. And I just remembered, hey, we got to promote. And he called me up and say, hey, can we do something? I'm like, sure, let's do it. Anything to help you, John. Congratulations to you guys on doing that and restoring art.
Well, we also, just as a quick note, it wasn't a Jon Stewart film, but the same group of filmmakers made another film, a horror Western called Ghost Riders. We just finished restoring that, and that's coming out on Blu-ray and DVD in February. So those same Texas guys, same crew.
Wow. Well, as I always say, you made my day by saying those two things, and I can't wait to get that box set. And I have to say this, have a good night tonight, a better day tomorrow. And I always say this, if you see someone without a smile, please give them one of yours because the world needs it. I'm Brian Sebastian, movie reviews and more. Steve, thank you so much for coming on. Honor and pleasure to meet you. And anything that I can do to help you guys in the future, just let me know. All right.
Thanks, Brian. Great talking to you.
You too. Thank you.